It has been brought to the attention of the Office of the Prime Minister that a media house has been carrying a story alleging that there has been some illegality in the Cabinet of Ministers making compensation to a landowner of a compulsory acquisition. It is unfortunate that those statements have been made, and the Office of the Prime Minister wishes to state categorically that the statements are false, and so we wish to clarify the process and the procedure that was used by the Cabinet of Ministers in determining compensation for the legal owner of the land that was compulsory acquired. I must also assure the general public that matters, especially when it comes to land acquisition, are not matters that the Cabinet of Ministers determine on their own, but the process is that the Department of Physical Planning, they would prepare what is called a cabinet memo. And in that memo, they would put in all the justification for the acquisition of the property, the whom, the when, the why, and they would also put the rationale. They would also attach a valuation to it, and they would make recommendations to the Cabinet of Ministers. And based on the documentation presented and the recommendations made by that cabinet memo, by the technical people of that ministry, then the Cabinet of Ministers will take a decision whether to accede to the recommendation or whether to send the memo back seeking further clarification. So let's look at the facts of that compulsory land acquisition so you can clearly understand the role of the Cabinet of Ministers in this matter. In August of 2013, a memo was presented to the Cabinet of Ministers to acquire land in Anse Jambette. And so I have Cabinet Conclusion number 491 of 2013. So in the year of 2013, the Cabinet of Ministers issued a notice to acquire lands for future development. And it says that Cabinet considered a memorandum to acquire lands, parcels number 037B95 and 96 for future touristic development at Anse Jambette in the quarter of Anse-Jambette. And so the first gazette was made on Monday, September 30th, 2013, with a notice of intent to acquire lands. Subsequent to that, on the 23rd of June, 2014, Cabinet Conclusion number 340 of 2014, the Declaration of Land Acquisition for Future Touristic Development at Anse Jambette in the quarter of Anse-Jambette, Cabinet went ahead and they acquired the property. And so a memo was presented to the Cabinet of Ministers, and the Cabinet considered the memo on the 27th of May 2014, and they went ahead and issued the second notification to acquire the land in Anse Jambette. And so by Gazette dated Monday, 22nd of July 2014, the Gazette made the declaration that government had acquired the lands. Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 speaks to the block and parcel number. And the second publication to say that Cabinet or the government had acquired the land was done on Monday, 28th July 2014. Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, where it speaks to the declaration of acquisition of land. So we can clearly see by July 20th, 2014, government had gone ahead based on the memo presented to them to acquire the lands in Anse Jambette. Once government had gone ahead and acquired the land, they went through the next step, which is writing to the rightful owner of the land, indicating that they had acquired the land and that they would be surveying the land and be preparing for compensation. So on October 15th, 2013, the Ministry of Physical Development wrote to Mr. Edward Joseph, everybody knows him as Chef Harry. On October 15th, 2013, the government of St. Lucia via the Ministry of Physical Development wrote to him indicating that the government of St. Lucia is in the process of acquiring block 037B, parcels 95 and 96 belonging to you for the purpose of future touristic development at Anse Jambette. It says the second publication of the notification of intention to acquire the subject portions of land was published in the St. Lucia Gazette on October 8th, 2013. This was done in accordance with Section 4 of the Lands Act. As a result, the ministry will be carrying out all preliminary surveys or investigations on the subject. Consequently, compensation will be paid accordingly. So Chef Harry was written to indicating we have acquired your land, we will survey it, and we will prepare to pay you accordingly. 15th October 2013. A response was sent to the Department of Physical Development by Amicus Law Chambers on 28th January 2014, a few months later. And Amicus indicated we act herein on behalf of Gold Sky Investment Limited. Pursuant to a deed of transfer executed between the parties on 11th October 2012, our client purchased from Mr. Edward Joseph certain land situated at Anse Jambette in the quarter of Anse Jambette. Our client has duly lodged the deed at the Registry of Land by way of caution, instrument number 2053/2013, which was duly registered on 22nd May 2013. And so Amicus Law Chamber wrote to the Ministry of Physical Development indicating that the land does not belong to Mr. Joseph, Edward Joseph, but it belongs to the client Gold Sky Investment. Subsequent to that, they also presented to the Department of Physical Planning the deed of the transfer of land that they had registered, and I have it right here as well. On the 12th of October 2013, a statutory declaration by Edward Chef Harry Joseph indicates that I hereby confirm and acknowledge that by deed of transfer executed by me on 11th October 2013 and for valuable consideration, I transferred lands belonging to me and registered in the Registry of Lands as block parcels 037B, 95 and 96 to the company known as Gold Sky Investments Limited. A true copy of the said deed is exhibited here and marked A. As such, I have given permission to the purchaser, who is Gold Sky Limited, to enter into possession of the said lands. Accordingly, I have no further financial interest in the said lands, and I further give all consents necessary to permit the purchaser to make the necessary application to develop the land. And so, Amicus Limited presented to the Department of Physical Planning this statutory declaration from Chef Harry, where he indicated that he has rescinded all rights and privileges to that land because he has sold the land. On February 2014, Amicus Limited presented a valuation report, and I want you to remember the timelines. We are still in 2014, which was under the previous administration. Amicus Limited presented a valuation report to the Department of Physical Planning for the value of the land that was acquired, and the valuation for the 7.78 acres of land was estimated at $10.16 million. Subsequent to the government receiving this, they went silent, and then in 2018, the chief surveyor of the Department of Physical Planning, he went ahead and did his own valuation on behalf of the government, and the valuation he did returned a value of $9.4 million. So the previous valuation done by the owner of the land was $10.16 million, but when the government did their own valuation, they came to a value of $9.4 million, and that was January 22nd, 2018. So you would see that the valuation by the government was less than the valuation by the owner of the property. In March 9th, 2018, the Attorney General Chambers wrote to the Department of Physical Planning because the owner of the land was seeking compensation, and there was an opinion given by the Attorney General's Chambers to the Department of Physical Planning. And I just want to read to you the recommendation by the Attorney General in that matter. The recommendation says, it is therefore recommended that the holders of all encumbrances and persons who have lodged caution in respect to the properties be notified of the acquisition pursuant to Section 8(1) of the Act. And it also says Gold Star has provided documentation purportedly signed by Mr. Joseph stating that he has relinquished all interest in the properties to Gold Star. Since Mr. Joseph is now deceased, it is recommended that the executor administrator of his estate be asked to confirm that the properties no longer form part of Mr. Joseph's succession. So what the AG was saying is, to finalize and to confirm that the land actually belongs to Gold Star, we need the person who was responsible for the estate of Chef Harry, who is his lawyer, who executed his will and his estate, to verify and to say that is the case. That was March 9th, 2018. Subsequent to that, on the 10th of March, 2021, the lawyers of Chef Harry wrote to the department, and the lawyer gave a statutory declaration, and I can give you what the statutory declaration says. It says, I, Henry Fred Joseph of Cap Estate, that I am an attorney at law practicing with St. Lucia. I have known Mr. Edward Joseph, aka Chef Harry, for many years. Prior to his death, I received instructions from the deceased to write down his last will and testament. And these instructions pertain to the assets which the deceased understood to have had in his possession during his conversations with me on the matter of making his will. The sale of the property was also subject of conversation between the deceased and I following being instructed in his will. In particular, I was informed by the deceased as it related to two separate parcels of land, namely Block 0037B, 95 and 96, the lands which the deceased explained were the subject matter of a sale to Gold Sky Investment Inc. And it says, to the best of my knowledge, understanding and belief, there was an understanding among the executors and myself that the lands could not have been viewed as forming part of the deceased estate, since the deceased had previously sold the lands to Gold Sky Investments Inc. Accordingly, the lands were omitted from the deed of transmission in accordance with the laws governing the administration of estates in St. Lucia. So the lawyers for Chef Harry also confirmed that the land was sold to Gold Sky Investment Limited and that this land did not form part of Chef Harry's estate. And so subsequent to that, in the Cabinet of Ministers, trying to determine and ensuring that they did the right thing, they asked that until that matter is finally settled, perhaps what should be best is to transfer the land back in the name of the legal owner, which was Chef Harry, whilst that matter was sorted out. So on April 6, 2021, the Cabinet of Ministers recommended to transfer the land back in the name of the legal owner before we can make any compensation. So Cabinet number 478 of 2019 speaks to transferring. Cabinet agreed that any further compensation which may be required to bring full and final settlement of this matter be agreed upon after determination of the rightful owner of the property and any conditions at the time of acquisition. So Cabinet, in all its deliberation, has been going for the right process in ensuring that the right person be paid. Subsequent to this, a memo was then presented to the Cabinet of Ministers with all the documents again from Amicus Limited, the letter from the lawyers, etc. And so Cabinet agreed on April 19th, 2021, and I want the public to understand this is the story. On April 19th, 2021, the Cabinet of Ministers, having reviewed all the documents that I spoke about, the letters from Chef Harry, the letters from his estate and his lawyers, etc., Cabinet agreed to the following: that block and parcel number 037B, 95 and 96, situated at Anse Jambette, quarter of Anse Jambette, for the purpose of facilitating touristic and other economic investment, Cabinet agreed that first priority for investment be given to the St. Lucia National. So 2, compensation to Gold Sky Investment Inc. in the sum of $9.4 million. And if you remember, the valuation was for $9.4 million. However, there was interest that was also accumulated on the value of the land based on negotiation with Gold Sky Limited. They agreed to forgo the interest and only to accept payment for the value of the land. Point number 3, the breakdown of the payment of the acquisition was as follows. 1. Invest St. Lucia will pay the sum of $3 million in consideration for receipt of the vested property. So what this says is part of the property would be vested into Invest St. Lucia, and they would pay $3 million for that property. The government of St. Lucia would pay the sum of $3 million in cash to the owners of the property, and the balance of the $3.4 million will be paid through the issuance of bonds. And so the estate was, the Gold Sky Limited was also going to receive $3.4 million in bonds. Point 4 also state that the settlement of other parties' interest in the block and parcel number, namely Indian Revenue, National Insurance, First National Bank, and Caribbean Banking Corporation, be dealt with directly by Gold Sky Investment and the estate of Edward Joseph. And the final point in the cabinet conclusion state, cabinet further agreed to rescind cabinet conclusion number 478 of 27th May 2019. And conclusion 478 of 27th May spoke to cabinet asking for the land to be vested back in the name of Chef Harry. And so in this cabinet conclusion, the cabinet is saying that we rescind that decision, meaning that the land should be vested back in the name of the Crown. And so, subsequent to that, on April 26, the Department of Planning proceeded to make the necessary arrangement to execute the cabinet conclusion. And so they wrote to amicus indicating that we will be paying you for the land. Here is the breakdown of the payment. They did that on the 27th of May. They also wrote to Invest St. Lucia, Roderick Cherry, seeking compensation for the $3 million and indicating that a portion of the land will be vested into them. And the last thing that the Department of Planning had to do was to rescind the cabinet conclusion and to put the land back in the name of the Crown. And so at the time of the story breaking out with the media houses, the Department of Physical Planning had not transferred the land back in the name of the Crown. And that is why the reporter was reporting that the land was still vested in the name of Chef Harry and that the wrongful person was being paid. But it was only a matter of timing where documents were being circulated before allowing for the final process to take place where the Department of Physical Planning would transfer the land back in the name of the Crown. That has since been done, and so we have the document showing that the land has been vested back in the name of the Crown. And so I want to state to the public that this is a lot to do about nothing, that the Cabinet of Ministers always go through the proper process. They ask the necessary questions based on recommendations by the technical people, and these technical people are the ones to execute the decision of Cabinet. Thank you.